Camilla Lowell Lyman was born on September 4th, 1932 in Westwood, Massachusetts. Camilla's father, Arthur Theodore Lyman III, hailed from a distinguished Boston family whose wealth originated from trade in China and expanded through investments in cotton mills and the cotton industry. According to news reports, Camilla began dressing in male clothing and subsequently identified as a man, legally shortening his name from Camilla to Cam in 1985. Acquaintances found that Cam bore an eerie resemblance to his father, sporting short hair and wearing herringbone jackets. It was also reported that Cam ingested steroids to grow a moustache. However, these particular steroids were only meant to be consumed by dogs. The multimillionaire, known for his skill in breeding and training Clumber Spaniels and Bernese Mountain Dogs, had a reputation for his talent, intelligence, and social awkwardness. Following his father's passing from lung cancer in 1968, Cam became increasingly distant from his family. His mother, Margaret, unfortunately passed away in 1972, and his behaviour became increasingly bizarre. He left the family estate, located on Thatcher Street in Westwood, Massachusetts, and relocated to a $2 million 40-acre Victorian-era estate in Hopkinton, Rhode Island, where he lived in a home within perimeters of a, quote, stockade-style fence, alongside 58 dogs, as well as household staff. He never had any known friendships or relationships and devoted himself to his dogs. In 1985, 53-year-old Cam hired George O'Neill, and the two quickly developed an unusually close bond, given Cam's reclusive nature. Known for rarely leaving his home except for dog-related activities, Cam seldom welcomed visits from family. Their newfound friendship led Cam to entrust George with significant responsibilities, granting him authority to collect his mail, manage his finances by cashing checks, and act as his power of attorney, overseeing his legal and financial affairs. George was also given the responsibility of taking care of the dogs and displaying them at various dog competitions. Over time, George O'Neill became Cam's only trusted companion, as Cam distanced himself from everyone else. His behaviour grew increasingly unconventional. He carried a briefcase filled with jewellery valued at thousands of dollars and often brought large sums of cash with him on routine trips to the grocery store. Details about Cam's life during this time remain scarce, as he had minimal contact with his family. Concerns arose during Christmas of 1987, when his sisters, Mary and Edith, noticed they hadn't received his annual greetings card. This absence, coupled with months of silence, marked the first time his family began to worry about his well-being. Cam's brother, Arthur, known as Teddy, reported his brother missing in December of 1988. Cam's family grew increasingly alarmed when they noticed checks sent to him were being deposited into a Rhode Island bank account rather than bearing his signature. In December 1988, once they had reported him missing to the police and informed the law firm managing the Lyman Trust, they hired Charles Allen to investigate. Charles uncovered that George O'Neill had been depositing checks from Cam's trust fund and was surprised to learn that George held Cam's power of attorney. Additionally, George was named the sole beneficiary of Cam's estate, positioning him to inherit everything. When questioned, George seemed unconcerned about Cam's disappearance, claiming it wasn't unusual for him to vanish. He recounted a phone argument with Cam in July of 1987 regarding the dogs. The following day, George visited Cam's home, where he found the phone torn from the wall and the dogs left unattended. He claimed that this was the last time he had any contact with Cam. When investigators questioned the household staff, however, George claimed that Cam had travelled to Europe for gender reassignment surgery. However, he was unable to provide any evidence to support this claim and admitted that, apart from telling his wife, he had kept this information to himself for 6 months without mentioning it to anyone else. George told the Detroit News in regards to Cam's alleged gender reassignment surgery, quote, "She'd been talking about it for years." And he further commented that Cam, quote, "looked better as a guy than as a woman anyway." Prime suspect George O'Neill's behaviour raised further suspicion as he refused to allow police to search Cam's property, claimed ownership of Cam's dogs, and pocketed funds by cashing cheques made out to Cam. A significant portion of Cam's wealth, ranging from $3 million to $5 million, including bank accounts and family heirlooms, had vanished, as well as clothes and other jewellery. Reports of the missing clothing prompted George O'Neill to dismiss the idea that his friend had possibly been kidnapped. As he pointed out, with a hint of sarcasm, people who are abducted typically don't take the time to, quote, bring a change of clothes. Investigator Charles Allen doubted O'Neill's claim that Cam had travelled to Europe for surgery, noting Cam's fear of even routine medical visits. Cam's sister, Mary, found it hard to believe he would ever abandon his cherished dogs, including his champion Clumber Spaniel, Raycroft Sheriff, who was Cam's pride and joy. Other individuals considered potential suspects in the case include Robert Ragosta, O'Neill's associate and Cam's attorney, as well as John and Judy Weeks, the caretakers of Cam's property. The investigation ultimately concluded without definitive proof that Cam hadn't voluntarily left for Europe. In 1994, Cam's sisters petitioned the courts to have him declared legally dead to prevent his fortune from being misappropriated. It was successful, and Cam was declared legally deceased the following year. His date of death was declared as July 20th, 1987. As outlined in his will, Cam's estate was designated to benefit the American Kennel Club's Museum of the Dog. Cam's family arranged for a headstone in the family plot, featuring an engraving of a German short-haired pointer, Cam's first champion breed. The stone was simple, with no inscription except for the image. In 1997, the case was reopened by a newly appointed police chief who initiated a search of Cam's property. In an unexpected turn of events, on the 24th of September 1997, human remains were discovered in a septic tank by Greg Siner and Gardner Young, the new owners of the estate, who had noticed an odd smell coming from the overflowing sewer system. Police were subsequently notified, and in October of 1998, dental records confirmed that the human remains belonged to Cam Lyman. The medical examiner determined that Cam had been murdered, likely around the time of his disappearance. No further information was published in regards to what evidence was presented to conclude that Cam had been murdered. Cam's sister, Mary, said, quote, "Getting that identification was my first priority. Nothing could be so important. I don't feel as aggressive about who killed Camilla. I certainly would be delighted if the police could come to some sort of resolution." George O'Neill was later convicted of embezzling $15,000 from Cam in 2003, resulting in a $450 fine and a 1-year prison sentence. Until Cam's body was discovered, George insisted that Cam was still alive, claiming he was in Europe. Eventually, George's attorney, Rosemary Healy, publicly commented on his stance, suggesting, quote, "Maybe George hates to think of her as dead." Healy further stated that, deep down, even her client believes Cam likely died shortly after disappearing. She highlighted that the lack of contact or activity in Cam's bank account and credit cards over an extended period supports this theory. Healy also stated, in regards to the theory Cam may have left his home voluntarily, quote, "Even if you don't care much about money, you don't leave your dogs behind." George O'Neill later told the media, quote, "She's dead. I don't know anything about it." Cam Lyman requested in his will to have his ashes scattered over Madison Square Garden in New York, quote, during the Westminster Kennel Club's dog contest. However, his family could not have that arranged. Therefore, Cam's ashes, which were in a small poplar box, were placed near the final resting place of his parents in a cemetery in Westwood, Massachusetts. A headstone with an inscription was erected, with Cam's full birth name, with his family having always referred to him in his life as Camilla. Cam's brother, Arthur, known as Teddy, passed away in 1993, and his sister, Edith, died in 2003. Mary was the last of the Lyman siblings to pass away, and died in 2018 at the age of 91. Sadly, they never found out what happened to Cam and why, and with George O'Neill's passing in July of 2011, it is highly unlikely that the case will ever be solved and will remain a chilling mystery.